Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
For 9 years, it was the solid ground beneath my life with Clara. In Cedar Creek, we built our family on peace and routine. I worked as a structural engineer, making sure buildings never collapsed, while Clara worked part-time at an art gallery, always home in time for Milo, our son. Life was simple, steady like a house without cracks. But then small changes appeared, so subtle I almost ignored them. Clara began paying unusual attention to her looks, her hair perfectly styled, a faint expensive perfume, new clothes that hugged her figure. She said she just wanted to feel good about herself, and I believed her, until Jasper came along, Milo's new best friend. It wasn't the boy, but his family that caught Clara's interest. She mentioned them constantly, volunteered to drive Milo over, and always had a reason why it had to be her. One afternoon, when I suggested letting Jasper's parents drop Milo home after a barbecue, Clara quickly refused, her smile too bright, too forced, and for the first time, unease settled in me, because the way she returned from those pickups, her flushed cheeks, her glowing eyes didn't look like errands had been run. It looked like she was returning from another life, one full of secrets. That cold knot of unease didn't dissolve. Instead, it took root, growing into a silent, watchful presence inside me. I started paying attention, not in an accusatory way, but with the quiet, methodical focus of an engineer searching for a structural flaw. I wasn't looking for a single, dramatic piece of evidence. I was looking for a pattern, a series of small, interconnected stress points that could reveal a deeper weakness. And the pattern was there, hiding in plain sight. Her phone, which used to lie face up on the kitchen counter, was now always placed screen down. It was set to silent more often than not, vibrating softly against the granite when a message came in, a secret tremor only she seemed to notice. When I'd walk into the room, she would often end a text conversation with a sudden, final tap of her thumb. Dinners became quieter. The easy flow of conversation that had once been the backdrop to our meals evaporated. She was physically present, but her mind was elsewhere. I would talk about my day, about a challenging project or a funny story from the office, and she would respond with a vague or, "That's nice, honey," her eyes holding a distant, unfocused glaze. But when Milo chattered about his time at Jasper's house, her attention would sharpen. It wasn't the story she was interested in. It was the logistics. So, what time did Jasper's dad get home? Or was his mom there the whole time? She was confirming details, checking her alibi, and she was using our son's innocent narrative to do it. One evening, Milo mentioned offhandedly, "Jasper's dad was in his office all day. He has this really cool chair." It was a small detail, but it snagged in my memory. Clara had told me she wasn't sure what he did. Later, as we were cleaning up, I asked her casually, "So, Jasper's dad really works from home? Must be nice." She didn't look at me, she just scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. "I guess, I don't really know," she murmured, before immediately changing the subject. "Did you remember to take the recycling out?" The most glaring inconsistency happened on a Thursday night. She was usually home from the gallery by 6. At 7, she was still out. I called her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I felt a prickle of genuine worry, which was quickly followed by a wave of suspicion that made me feel sick to my stomach. She finally walked in at 7:30, holding 2 grocery bags. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her tone breezy. The line at the store was insane. I glanced into the bags she placed on the counter. They were practically empty. A carton of milk and a loaf of bread, nothing that would justify a 90-minute delay. She wasn't nervous or flustered. She was just disconnected. It was the strangest feeling, as if I was living with a ghost who was expertly mimicking the routines of the woman I had married. She was living 2 scripts, and I was only a character in the less interesting one. I didn't say anything. What could I say? "You were late and you only bought 2 things?" She would have laughed it off, called me paranoid. And maybe I was. But my gut, the part of an engineer that works on instinct and experience, told me that these weren't isolated incidents. They were data points, the rushed movements, the vague excuses, the mismatched timelines, the visible discomfort when asked a simple question. It all formed a coherent, terrifying picture. She was emotionally, and perhaps physically, somewhere else. With someone else, the coming Saturday loomed in my mind like a deadline. She had already mentioned, with that same forced casualness, that Milo would be at Jasper's, and she'd pick him up around 4. This time, I wouldn't just sit at home and wonder. The slow poison of doubt was more agonizing than any brutal truth could be. I needed to know. I had to see it for myself. On Saturday morning, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that precedes a storm. I played with Milo, helped him build a sprawling Lego castle in the living room, and made pancakes for breakfast, all while the plan solidified in my mind. When Clara came downstairs, she was already dressed with that now familiar, meticulous care. A soft cashmere sweater, dark jeans that fit her perfectly, and the faint, sweet scent of her perfume. "I'm going to head over to Mark's house this afternoon," I said, naming our neighbor. "He's got a power washer I need to borrow for the deck." "Oh, okay," she said, barely looking up from her coffee. "Don't be too long." The ease with which she accepted it was another small, sharp cut. She didn't want me here. At 3:30 p.m., 20 minutes before she was scheduled to leave, I made my move. I told her I was leaving for Mark's, grabbed my keys, and walked out. Instead of going next door, I got into my car, drove around the block, and parked where I had a clear view of our driveway. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt like a spy in my own life, a stranger watching the woman I loved, prepared to betray me. Right on schedule, at 3:50, her car backed out of the driveway. She was a picture of suburban motherhood on a Saturday afternoon errand. No one would ever suspect a thing. I gave her a 30-second head start before turning on my engine and pulling out, keeping a safe distance. I followed her down the main avenue. My mind, the logical, analytical part of me, was running through the possibilities. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she really was just stopping at a different store first. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of it. But my gut knew better. She drove toward Jasper's neighborhood, and for a moment, my heart leaped with a desperate hope. I was wrong. I was a paranoid fool. But then, at the intersection where she should have turned right, she signaled left. She turned away from Jasper's house and began weaving through a series of unfamiliar residential streets. This wasn't a detour. It was a destination. The hope in my chest died, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of dread. After another 5 minutes, she pulled over and parked in front of a modest, single-story house with a plain facade and a low gate. It was neat but anonymous, with a silver sedan already sitting in the driveway. It was definitively not the home of a family with a 7-year-old boy. I drove past, my eyes scanning every detail, and parked a half block down, partially hidden by an overgrown oak tree. I watched in my rearview mirror. I saw her get out of the car, check her reflection in the window, and smooth her hair. She walked to the gate with a confidence that spoke of familiarity. This was not her first time here. She pressed the doorbell, the front door opened, and a man appeared. He was tall, with a lean, athletic build, wearing a simple dark t-shirt. He didn't look surprised to see her. He smiled a small, private smile, opened the gate, and stepped aside. Clara walked in without hesitation, and the door closed behind them, sealing them in their secret world. Time seemed to stop. The world outside the car, a kid riding a bike, a dog barking in the distance, faded into an irrelevant hum. My universe had shrunk to the four walls of that house. I sat motionless, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. There was no more doubt, no more room for rationalization. The man wasn't Jasper's father. Milo wasn't the reason she was here. Our son was the excuse, the smokescreen, the emotional shield she used to hide her affair. The minutes crawled by. 20, 30, 45. Each second that ticked by was a fresh layer of betrayal. What hurt more than the thought of the physical act happening inside was the chilling premeditation of it all. The meticulous planning, the consistent lies, the cold-blooded use of our child's innocence. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. This was a routine. A ritual. Just shy of an hour later, the front door opened again. Clara stepped out. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and her face wore a blank, empty expression. She didn't look guilty, but she didn't look happy either. She looked finished, as if she had just completed a task. She got into her car and drove away with the same calm normality as if she had just had a cup of coffee with a friend. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner. Then, I put my own car in drive. I drove for miles without any destination, the silence in the car deafening. Everything I had refused to believe, everything I had tried to explain away, was now an undeniable, brutal fact. She wasn't just cheating. She was deceiving me with a methodical, convenient cruelty I never thought her capable of. She had underestimated me. She had mistaken my trust for blindness. And now, I had to go home and face the woman who was a complete stranger to me. Returning to the house was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every object, the photos on the mantelpiece, Milo's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the indentation on the sofa where she always sat, felt like a prop in a play that had just been revealed as a farce. I walked through the silent rooms, the air thick with unspoken lies. I sat on the couch, the same one we had picked out together years ago, and I waited. I didn't feel rage, not the hot, explosive kind. What I felt was a profound and icy clarity. The marriage was over. The only thing left was to officiate its death. She arrived home just before 6, exactly when she would have if her fabricated story were true. The door opened and Milo, who must have been dropped off by Jasper's parents after all, ran to me and jumped into my arms. I hugged him tightly, burying my face in his hair, breathing in his innocent scent. He was the only thing that felt real in that moment. "Daddy, we built a giant rocket ship," he exclaimed. I bet you did, buddy, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. Clara walked in behind him, a serene smile on her face, the picture of domestic tranquility. She was carrying 2 small grocery bags, the props to complete her performance. You wouldn't believe how crowded the market was, she said, breezing into the kitchen. And then I got to chatting with Jasper's mom. You know how it is. Lost track of time completely. She began putting away the few items, her movements fluid and practiced. For her, everything was as it had always been. For me, that sense of normality had been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I stood up from the couch. I didn't say a word. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the kitchen counter where she was humming softly to herself. I took out my phone and placed it on the granite countertop between us, screen facing up. On the screen were 3 images, captured with cold precision. The first, her car parked in front of the anonymous house. The second, the front door open, the unknown man standing in the threshold. The third, Clara, smiling that private smile as she walked inside. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Her humming stopped. Her hands froze over a carton of orange juice. The serene smile on her face didn't just fade, it collapsed, as if the muscles holding it up had been severed. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted from the phone to my face, searching for an escape, an explanation, a denial that didn't exist. The visual proof was irrefutable. I kept my voice low, devoid of emotion. You have until 10 o'clock tonight to leave. Her mouth opened, a small, soundless gasp. There will be no conversation, I continued, each word a carefully placed stone building a wall between us. No explanations. No request for forgiveness. Trust has been destroyed, and with it, your right to remain under this roof. You used our son, Clara. You used him as a cover to meet another man. That is not just a betrayal of me. It is a betrayal of this entire family. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I had already turned my back on her. I walked upstairs with determined steps, went into our bedroom, my bedroom, now, and opened her closet. I pulled out 2 large suitcases and began to pack her things. I didn't fold them neatly. I didn't handle them with care. I moved with a mechanical urgency, removing her presence from my space. Each piece of her clothing I stuffed into a bag felt like I was extracting a falsified memory from my own history. Downstairs, there was only silence. Absolute, profound silence. She didn't rage, she didn't plead, she didn't protest. The truth had already won. When I brought the suitcases down, I placed them by the front door. If there is anything else you want, you need to take it now, I said, my voice still a flat monotone. Whatever is left will be put in boxes and sent to you later. Finally, she moved. Like a sleepwalker, she began to gather her personal effects, her laptop, the toiletries from the bathroom, a few books from the nightstand. She avoided my gaze, her movements small and defeated. I stood by the door, watching not out of spite, but out of a grim necessity. I had to see it through. She had made her choices. These were the consequences. Milo was already asleep in his room, oblivious to the quiet demolition of his family. I had made sure of it, closing his door and turning on his white noise machine before I had confronted her. His innocence was the one thing I would protect at all costs. At 9:50 p.m., 10 minutes before the deadline, Clara stood by the front door with her suitcases. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't look back. She just opened the door and walked out into the night. I stood there for a long moment after she left. There had been no shouting, no drama, just the chilling sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, sealing the end of a life I had never imagined would end this way. The silence that descended upon the house after Clara left was different from the silence that had preceded it. It was no longer heavy with unspoken tension. It was a clean, hollow void. The lie was gone. The doubt was gone. Only the truth remained, and even though it was a brutal, ugly thing, it was solid. I could build on it. I walked through the house, turning off lights, my footsteps echoing in the new emptiness. I paused at Milo's door, cracking it open just enough to see him. He was sleeping soundly, a small, perfect silhouette in the dim glow of his nightlight, completely unaware that his world had been irrevocably altered. A wave of fierce, protective love washed over me. From this moment on, I had to be stronger than I had ever been, not just for myself, but for him. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in the middle of the king-size bed that suddenly felt like a vast, cold expanse. But alongside the pain, there was a strange, unexpected feeling, relief. The gnawing uncertainty that had been eating me alive for weeks was gone. I knew the worst, and I had survived it. The next morning, a Sunday, I woke up before dawn. The house was still. The usual sounds of Clara moving about in the kitchen, the scent of her coffee brewing, were absent. It was just me and the quiet creak of the floorboards. I went downstairs and started making breakfast for Milo, focusing on the simple, methodical task of scrambling eggs. When he came down, his hair a mess from sleep, he looked around. Where's Mom? I had rehearsed this. I sat down with him at the table and kept my voice gentle and calm. Mom had to go away for a little while. Buddy, it's going to be just you and me for a bit, but I'm right here, and I will take care of everything. He accepted it with the simple trust of a child. Okay, can I have extra ketchup? That was the simplicity I was fighting to protect. The world where the biggest problem was the amount of ketchup on your eggs. While Milo watched cartoons, I went into my home office and began the second phase of my plan. I was no longer a husband in mourning. I was an engineer building a new structure from the ground up. I logged onto the bank's website and systematically began untangling our finances. I opened a new account in my own name and transferred exactly half of our joint savings into it. I canceled her supplementary credit cards. I printed out statements, mortgage documents, and utility bills. I was creating a clear, objective record of our shared life, preparing for its legal dissolution. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer my firm had on retainer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed. I explained the situation concisely, without emotional embellishment. I had irrefutable proof of infidelity. I wanted to file for divorce immediately. My primary and non-negotiable goal was sole physical custody of my son. His mother used him as a pawn in her affair, I told her, my voice hard as steel. I will not allow his life to be destabilized by her choices. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. You've handled the initial phase perfectly, Silas, she said. No yelling, no violence, just clear action. The evidence is solid. We will file this week. We will build a fortress around you and your son. A fortress. That was exactly what it felt like. Every document I organized, every call I made, every step I took was another stone in the wall. I was building to protect Milo's future and my own sanity. The news of the separation began to ripple through our small circle of friends and family. I kept the explanation brief and final. Clara and I have separated. She has moved out. The marriage is over. Some were shocked. Others, I noticed, reacted with a sad, knowing look that suggested they had seen the cracks long before I had. I didn't want pity or gossip. I just wanted to move forward. The emotional demolition was complete. Now, it was time for reconstruction. Clara did not handle the silence well. My complete lack of engagement, my refusal to be drawn into a fight or a negotiation, seemed to leave her unmoored. For the first 2 weeks, she was adrift in a sea of her own making, and I was the lighthouse that refused to shine a light for her. Her first attempts to breach my fortress were emotional. Long, rambling text messages began to arrive late at night. They were a chaotic mix of apology, blame, and self-pity. I can't sleep, see. This house, my sister's house, it isn't home. I miss you. I miss Milo. He meant nothing. You have to believe me. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless escape. Don't throw away 9 years for this. How could you be so cold? How could you just throw me out without even talking? I read every single one. I absorbed the words, recognized the manipulative undercurrents, and then I deleted them without a reply. There was nothing to say. What she had broken was not a window that could be patched up. She had dynamited the foundation. Her regrets were 10 years too late. When the emotional appeals failed, she tried a different tactic. Veiled threats, delivered through her newly hired lawyer. She hinted at contesting custody, at painting me as an angry, unstable husband who had thrown his wife out into the street. My lawyer, Evelyn, was unfazed. Let her try, she said over the phone. We have the photos. We have the timeline. We have your calm, methodical response. She has a pattern of deceit that directly involves their child. Any judge will see that. Evelyn was right. Clara's attempts to gain leverage only made her look more desperate and less stable. Every move she made was a miscalculation. The conciliation hearing was scheduled for the following month. I walked into the sterile mediation room feeling calm and prepared. I wore a suit, my files were organized in a neat leather portfolio, and Evelyn was by my side. Clara arrived a few minutes later. She looked tired. The vibrant glow she used to have after her errands was gone, replaced by a dull, weary pallor. She attempted a weak smile when she saw me, but I met her gaze with a cool, impassive stare. In front of the mediator, she played the role of the remorseful wife. She spoke about preserving the family, about not wanting Milo to grow up in a broken home. She claimed she loved me, that she wanted to work things through. It was a compelling performance, full of tears and choked up words. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. When it was my turn, I simply nodded to Evelyn. She placed a single file on the table in front of the mediator. Inside were the photos, a printed log of her late arrivals, and a sworn affidavit from me detailing the events of that Saturday. The silence that filled the room as the mediator examined the evidence was more damning than any accusation I could have ever shouted. The photographs spoke for themselves. They were not open to interpretation. They were the truth, inarguable and stark. The attempt at agreement was brief. The mediator, seeing the futility of reconciliation, moved quickly to the terms of the separation. The outcome was exactly what I had demanded. I was granted primary physical custody of Milo. Clara would have bi-weekly, supervised visits, with a possibility of unsupervised visits in the future, contingent upon her emotional stability and cooperation. The judge accepted all the conditions without amendment. For legal purposes, the separation was in progress. But for me, the marriage had ended the exact moment I saw her walk through that stranger's door. The rest was just paperwork. In the months that followed the hearing, a new rhythm established itself in our house. A quieter, simpler rhythm. The empty space left by Clara was tangible, especially in the evenings after Milo was asleep, but it was no longer a painful void. It was becoming a space of peace, of potential. I started to reclaim the house, to make it ours again. I repainted the living room, changing the soft beige Clara had chosen to a crisp, clean gray. I rearranged the furniture, breaking up the old, familiar patterns. I took down most of the old photos, not out of anger, but out of a need for a fresh start. I left up only the ones of me and Milo, and a few of Milo by himself. This was our story now. Bit by bit, I started to reclaim myself, too. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected. I started going to the gym again, feeling the burn in my muscles as I worked out years of accumulated stress. I wasn't looking for someone else. I was rediscovering the man I had been before my identity became completely entwined with being Clara's husband. I was just Silas again, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Milo adapted with the incredible resilience of a child. He missed his mother, and the supervised visits were often tense and awkward. He loved her, but he could sense that something fundamental had shifted, that her presence no longer fit in our lives the way it used to. Clara tried, but she always seemed distant, as if she were playing the part of a mother without remembering the lines. One night, near the end of the 6-month waiting period before the divorce was finalized, my phone rang. It was her. I almost didn't answer, but some impulse made me accept the call. Her voice was quiet, devoid of the usual pleading or anger. "Silas," she began, I just wanted to say that I understand now." I remained silent, listening. "I'll never forget the way you handled it," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "With such firmness, but without aggression. With clarity, but without humiliating me. I was a coward. I thought I could have everything, that I would never be discovered. I only realized the scale of what I had lost when I saw that front door close, and I was on the outside." I took a deep breath. "I hope you can find your own value again, Clara," I said, the words coming from a place beyond the pain, because whoever lies to the one they love, before they ever deceive the other person, is already lost to themselves. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then a soft click as she hung up. It was the last time we ever spoke about it. 2 days later, the final divorce papers arrived in the mail. I read each line carefully in the quiet of my office, signed my name on the designated line with a steady hand, and sealed the envelope. As I walked outside to put it in the mailbox, the crisp morning wind hit my face. It felt like freedom. I hadn't won or lost. I had simply overcome. That night, as I was tucking Milo into bed, he looked up at me with his big, serious eyes. "Is Mom ever going to come back home, Daddy?" It was the question I had been preparing for. I sat on the edge of his bed and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "No, buddy," I said softly. "Our home is just with you and me now." Sometimes, when people hurt each other very badly, the best thing they can do is take care of themselves in separate places so they can heal. He seemed to understand. He nodded slowly, closed his eyes, and snuggled deeper under the covers. I stayed by his side for a few more minutes, watching his peaceful face, knowing that my mission was now singular, to protect that peace. Clara's betrayal had wounded me deeply, but it had not destroyed me. In the end, she couldn't take the one thing I valued most, the one thing that was truly mine, my dignity. And it was with that dignity that I would move forward, whole, clean, and unafraid to start over.